Up, a recap of what's happening at City Hall with John Ongaro. The views expressed in this program are solely of those of the host and not necessarily those of the radio station or its partners.
Well, away we went last night with a special edition of the City Council meeting, and on a Monday night, usually moved to Tuesdays. Yep. This is because it was budget time. A classic line sent to me last night from inside City Hall that I need to repeat. I'm not taking full credit for this, but it pretty much sums up the entire night. Tell me this is the last capital budget discussion before the election without telling me this is the last capital budget discussion before the election. Yeah, that pretty much sums it up. We started on time last night. Only Councillor Gertuga was missing from the roster. In case you missed it, your council started discussions last night on the capital budget for the upcoming 2 years. This is a new strategy that allows administration to plan ahead for better planning for major projects over the next couple of years. Administration did an exceptional job of putting together the budget document. That is not only easily read, but also exceptionally well laid out. We're talking about millions of dollars here and how it's going to be spent over the next couple of years. You would think that this should make things easier for council. At one point last night, Councillor Folds pointed out the old way they used to review the budget with hundreds and hundreds of pages and a couple of 3-inch binders, and councillors were asked to study them. This new format should be nice and easy, right? Mm-hmm. We'll get to that part in a second, but tell me this is the last capital budget discussion before the election without telling me this is the last capital budget discussion before the election. So let's quickly review a couple of the highlights from last night's budget that was delivered by administration. You too can review it. I'm going to do that thing that they do on videos like the cool kids do. I'll put a link to the budget document below.
Oh, perfect.
And I point down.
Right there.
Yeah, you know
Love
what
it. Very good.
So you too can go and have a look at it. It's 154 pages. It's a very easy read and exceptionally well laid out. So quickly, a couple of standouts from last night where money is going in the next couple of years. $10 million for the expansion of the EMS headquarters. That's needed. How about Central Avenue? We've talked about this before, but now it's in the budget. Central Avenue area is getting an entirely new neighborhood with $20 million being spent over 2 years to create a neighborhood with 1,260 new housing units, new roads, sewers, sidewalks, and more. Everything is included. It all starts next year with the expansion of Amber Drive first, and you can expect a 2028-29 completion. It's great news for a huge chunk of land that's been underdeveloped, and most of it is funded. That's a big deal. Cumberland Street downtown is getting an upgrade, kind of like Red River Road, but not nearly as pretty, but it is getting done to finish up the downtown area. The Black Bay Bridge, the historic Black Bay Bridge, is getting an upgrade, and so is the Pacific Avenue Bridge to the east end. That bridge reconstruction and retrofit is about $6 million. Also, Central Avenue overpass, just down the street from us, getting a new railing. $1 million for that. There are also some big ticket items, including a new plan that includes a new organic waste processing facility to support the implementation requirements of the Green Bin program and renewal of existing facilities at the City of Thunder Bay Solid Waste and Recycling Facility on Maple Ward Road. How much? $22 million over 2 years. Wow. 10.5 next year and 10.5 the year following. We're also spending about $5 million for new fire trucks, too. That's on the list. The festival area, Marina Park, getting its $1.7 million start this year and then another $1 million next year. That's all grant funded. $3.2 million next year spent on aquatics facilities. How about $1.5 million being spent on arena and stadia equipment renewal? And the Victoriaville, can we still call it that? Yeah. The Parkade on the south end of town, $1.2 million in updates. And more big news last night. City Manager John Collins suggesting last night that we don't need a new police headquarters. What? You may remember this file that's been floating around for years. The police station is in shambles and unbelievably outdated. But last night it was suggested that an addition be built and money spent to upgrade the facilities instead of dropping $100 million on a new one. Watch this space. We'll see what happens with that. Now, of course, there was a lot more with a lot more detail. Page by page, the city treasurer did a great job of walking us through each section of the budget last night. And then after each section, the chair opened the floor to questions. Now, I'm normally all for asking questions for clarity, but what happened last night was so blatantly obvious it bordered on nauseating. Tell me this is the last capital budget discussion before the election without telling me it's the last capital budget discussion before the election. I would love to spend time this morning pointing out some of the obvious pieces from last night that were kind of on the ridiculous side, but I'm only going to stick to two. First, let the record show that Councillor Rajni Agarwal used every section to exhaust her 5 minutes of time for questioning and then exhausted all 3 rounds for each section for another 5 minutes each, using her time to its fullest. Over and over again, Councillor Agarwal's questioning was not asking questions of the budget or process. No, it was an attempt to pick apart administration's work and try to find mistakes. She didn't find any. Over and over again, things were explained to her that any one of us, including me, that would have read that document could have answered for her. But 5 minutes of camera time times 3 rounds gets your name out there. The second head scratcher came from Councillor Greg Johnson, who put an amendment forward to spend an additional $40,000 to clean ditches in rural areas along the roads. $40,000 on hundreds of millions of dollars of budget. $40,000.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, to dig them out to make sure the water flows better, because you know that's going to make the roads last longer. That led to an entire discussion and conversation with a bunch of councillors that $40,000 to clean ditches is just a small thing, and it's more of a pet project, and we shouldn't be nickel and diming every piece of the budget. But that's what councillors used to do. They don't anymore. It's not about funding their pet projects anymore, thankfully. We should let the engineers and the experts decide we need these things because they know more than us. Also, in the past, the money that was set aside to clean these ditches, there's always money left over. There's no need for an extra $40,000. Thankfully, that amendment went down in a ball of flames. Now, there was a fun part of the night last night. You can't make this stuff up. Every once in a while, a counselor comes forward and makes me laugh, like literally out loud, to a point where I have to rewind it, record it, and then send it to Danny. Because this was fantastic. About halfway through the night, Councillor Hamilton, well, he took his turn and he had this to point out.
I had some questions on the Packers too, on 6-7, page 67. All the parents looked at me, it's like, 6-7. But anyway.
You have to get in the 6-7 reference in there.
Did he actually go there?
It was fantastic, and it did get a great laugh. So thank you for the comic relief, Councillor Hamilton. Later in the evening, another failed amendment. Councillor Agarwal, this time still very upset that the Clean, Green and Beautiful Committee is no longer, tried to take money out of the budget, put it back into the budget, went back and forth for a great period of time, at which time, when the amendment came to the floor and the chair asked for a seconder to put it on the floor for a debate, Councillor Agarwal heard crickets like the rest of us did. Nobody supported her. That was scrapped. And finally, another part of the night that stood out with this entire budget process, Councillor Folds brought up the picnic table discussion from a couple of years ago. This discussion from years ago was legendary. I believe if I looked hard enough, I could find the piece on this. There was a budget discussion many years ago about spending money to pay somebody to move picnic tables. That's how specific the budget used to be. Line by line, councillors used to beat these things up and find little pieces of the budget that they'd try to remove to pay for other projects. Councillor Folds brought up the fact that we spent 2 hours one year talking about a $65,000 budget item to have somebody move picnic tables around. Yeah. The purpose of him pointing that out is that's not what last night was supposed to be. That's not what we do anymore. We have a talented administrative team that puts together an exceptional document to deliver to make it easier for councils to pass things through. Sure, they can go through things line by line, but all of that could have been done offline with an email. Instead, tell me it's about, it's an election year. There were some questions that were very brief, 30 seconds at the most, but a couple of councillors took the time to pontificate and to apply for a job at next year's election. There were no amendments. The entire budget was unanimously approved. That's a first for this group at 9:40. 4 hours and 40 minutes on an entire discussion that could have taken 20. If I was a councillor, hypothetically, which I'm not, maybe one day, but I highly doubt it. If I was in the room last night, the first thing I would have done when seeing that these councillors were sticking their neck out just to get their face on television, I would have called the question immediately. let's just end this right now. It is not a campaign stop. It is a budget, and the budget is put together by administration that spends a ton of time doing so. The questions at times were ridiculous. The repetitiveness was ridiculous. The chair had to countless times point out, you're over your 5 minutes, and cut people off. It finally passed at 9:40 last night. It'll be ratified in the next big city council meeting on December 2nd for final approval. Now, there's a couple of big meetings coming up. First of all, there are 2 more tonight. The first one is the Growth Standing Committee. That's on par for tonight. The Smart Growth Action Plan is going to be there. The Vacant Dilapidated Buildings program that breaks down the buildings that need to come down. And then another property-related matter. That starts at 4:30. The other big one that happens tonight is the Finance and Administration Standing Committee meeting. That starts at 7. The first item on the agenda, the Thunder Bay Community Tennis Center. That's right. The Rogers Tennis Center is almost done. The dome is supposed to go up next week. It's going to be a beautiful facility. This operation, this organization has done an exceptional job of fundraising. They have worked extremely hard to come up with the money needed to build this facility, but they are short. We've seen this movie before. They're asking council for $630,000 backed by the stabilization reserve and with some repayments in there commencing within 2 years of signing the documents. Now, the entire facility was supposed to cost $4.1 million, of which a lot of the funding was in place. The city's portion of that building is $1.5 million. The tennis center is coming forward to say, can we please have the second half of our payment now, as we're $630,000 short? Well, 50% of that payment, $1.5 million, is being held back until the completion of the building. So they're asking for it early. Again, the building was supposed to be $4.32 million. It's now at $4.95 million. And they're going to be looking for external grant funding and find more support to help with the shortfall. But they're asking the city for a little bit of help. Administration has put their 2 cents forward, and they're saying no to it. They're suggesting to council that we say no at this time to give the tennis center $630,000, which is kind of ironic because the art gallery came to ask for a couple of million. We don't know how much the turf facility is going to come ask for. It could be, but the tennis center has raised 90% of the money. They need $630,000 to get by. Administration suggests turning it down. So that meeting tonight is at 7. Finally, a couple of other big meetings coming up with things that are hot topics. The surplus properties. You've seen this all over the place. We talked about it on the show yesterday. The special Growth Standing Committee meeting will be on December the 1st at 4:30 to allow for deputations, which there will be many of them that night, to talk about the people in that neighborhood that do not want the surplus properties in their neighborhoods turned into apartments. That all comes down December 1st. That was that. The meeting ended last night at 9:45.
So just to confirm, the capital budget is going to be
It's
approved?
Well, it's been approved by the committee. Now it goes for ratification. That's where the city council says yes or no. Now, there is going to be a couple of more people that are going to try to get nickels and dimes out of this. But that is coming up next month, and so that's when it'll be ratified. Then we move on to the operations side of the budget. So that's going to get interesting.
Okay, but the capital side could be approved once, or obviously ratified, but that's for 2 years.
It's for 2 years, but then next year it'll be for two more years.
Got it. Okay.
It'll be 27, 28 next year.
Anywhere in that budget, did it talk about fireworks?
No, that would be operational.
Operational.
I believe
okay,
that would be.
we'll wait for that.
I'm not
one.
an accountant. We have expert accountants that do all of this.
Right.
It will be interesting. Keep in mind that this city council approved a 2.8% tax increase. 2.8. So far, administration has delivered them a 2.8 tax increase.
Look at that.
Now, they need to keep their hands out of the pot to make sure that it stays at 2.8. We'll see what happens.
All right. There's your City Council Roundup. Full recap, by the way, you can find at yourthunderbay.ca. And you said you're attaching a link to
the actual budget document. It's 150 pages, but an easy read. You can flip through it. You can see your streets on there, what's getting upgraded,
Great.
what's getting fixed. It's all in that document. It's super easy. I'm sorry this went a little long. I tried to make it around 6-7 minutes.
6-7. You went there,
I
huh?
had
All
to do
right.
it again,
Sounds good. Thanks, John. There it is.